Alright, I gotta talk about something here right off the bat. So, in my previous Sonic 06 video, I got a number of comments from people basically saying that because I'm playing a modded version of Sonic 06 with all these improvements and fixes, my review of the game is essentially invalid. It does not work as a proper critique of the game because I am not playing the actual Sonic 06 that was made by the developers and released. I'm playing a version that I have gone out of my way to enhance outside of the developers' creations. And so my review is biased or unfair or giving the game too much credit because I'm not having to deal with the issues that the game has. Blah, 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 and, okay, I have two things to say about this. First of all, these people are assuming that I only like Sonic 06 because I'm playing this modded version of the game, which is incorrect. Before I played the modded version of Sonic 06, I did play the normal Sonic 06 on my 360. That's what the footage you're watching right now is. And as I said at the beginning of my previous video, I have not played Sonic 06 in like 10 years. The last time I played it, I thought the game was fucking trash, and I was very much like most people when it comes to this game. I thought it was just a piece of garbage and completely worthless. It was in coming back to play the game, the normal game on my 360, that I started to appreciate that there are some good things in this game that aren't completely terrible. To be clear, I'm not saying that Sonic 06 is a good game. I never said that, and I'm not saying that the game is underrated either. This game is awful in so many ways, and it has a shit ton of problems. But what I'm trying to get across is that I don't think that this game is a 100% completely irredeemable piece of trash. There are a lot of issues here, but like pretty much every 3D Sonic game up to this point, there are also good parts that I actually can enjoy. And for people that have a tolerance to 3D Sonic game bullshit, it's not that difficult to put up with this game's problems to enjoy the parts of it that are actually fun. A lot of the positive things I had to say about Sonic 06 in Part 1 apply whether we're talking about the base game or the modded version. Now, on the topic of me using a modded version of Sonic 06 for my review, something I think I need to clarify to people is this is not a retrospective. I'm not looking back at these games in the context of how they came out, how they were released, what was going on in the game industry at the time, or any of that shit. I don't give a fuck about any of that. I am looking at them simply as video games that you can play right now, and in the context of playing them right now, you can improve Sonic 06 substantially, and there's no reason not to. If you're going to play Sonic 06 and you don't use all these mods, then you are just choosing to play an inferior version of the game, and I have no idea why you would do that to yourself. I understand some people don't have access to gaming PCs or aren't into modding and all that kind of stuff. I get that, but for people like me who are, why wouldn't I play this version of the game? There's this weird stigma that I've seen about game reviews that a lot of people seem to have, that like a review needs to be like a quote-unquote proper like analysis and breakdown of the game as a piece of art created by the artist and not as anything else. We have to judge what the creator created, we have to judge their artistic vision and their execution of it. Which you certainly can review games like that, but you don't necessarily have to. I am personally not doing that. As I said, I am simply reviewing these as games you can play, and in that context, I see no reason not to improve the game. The only reason to play the unmodified version of Sonic 06 would be to formulate a proper opinion about it, but I quite frankly don't give a fuck about that. I play games because I want to have fun. I don't look at games like a fucking scientist examining a specimen from behind the glass to figure out all of its traits. I'm just a guy that plays video games because I enjoy them, and if you tell me I can make this game more enjoyable, then of course I'm going to do that. And I think it's fair to review my experience with the game because I would recommend other people have the same experience rather than playing the original version of Sonic 06. So to anyone who thinks that my reviews of these games are tainted because I'm not playing the true, proper, original versions of the games created and released by the developers, too bad, I don't give a fuck. Now, back to Sonic 06, I am next going to cover the Silver campaign. And Silver plays fairly differently than Sonic or Shadow. He does not have the traditional Sonic adventure gameplay. Silver is more kind of where you go for more traditional 3D platforming, which personally makes me go, oh no, that has never gone well in the past, in my opinion. You know, things like Amy in Sonic Adventure or the mech stages of SA2. Whenever Sonic games have tried to do traditional 3D platforming, I do not think it's worked out very well. How does it work out for Silver? Well, let's take a look. Silver's main gameplay gimmick is his telekinesis, or psychokinesis, whatever you want to call it, doesn't matter. Silver's main ability is that you can activate his telekinesis and then walk up to objects in order to pick them up, and then from here you can throw them around at enemies to deal damage to them. You don't aim the objects you throw at all, it's all done with an auto-aiming system, and it works fairly reliably, though sometimes when you throw objects, they're not really going to hit the target in the way you want them to, or sometimes it'll just be inconsistent and not really deal damage. But generally, for the most part, Silver's throwing objects does work how you would expect it to. Except for one major problem, I would say, which is that you can pick up a lot of stuff with Silver. As long as you have meter, you can just pick up more and more shit. But it's actually not good to be carrying a whole lot of stuff, because since everything with Silver is physics-based, when you throw an object, it's always going to throw the first object that you picked up, which usually is going to end up buried behind all of the other objects you're holding. And so when you throw it, it's just going to immediately collide with those and just get veered off course and not at all hit the target you wanted it to. So it's generally not a good idea to pick up too much stuff at once. And yeah, Silver's telekinesis does work on the meter, which works similarly to how it does with Sonic, where it starts off full, and every time you pick up something, you're going to expend a little bit of meter. And it does also refill anytime that you're touching the ground. And so with this telekinesis stuff, Silver has a pretty large emphasis on combat in his gameplay, and the core of his combat ends up, you know, going around to like boxes and objects in the environment, and using them as ammunition to throw them at enemies. I actually find that Silver's gameplay is a little bit similar to the gunplay in Shadow the Hedgehog, in that you just go up to things and use an auto-aiming soft lock-on system to throw projectiles at enemies. It's just that you replace guns that have a lot of ammo with just picking up stuff all around your environment. Which I think actually works better than it did in Shadow, because there's a little bit more thought to how you fight enemies in this game, because you have to look around for objects all the time to, you know, keep yourself stocked up on things to throw at the enemies. You can also, like, grab enemy projectiles and things like that, which is pretty cool. You have to balance dodging enemy attacks with going up to objects to pick them up, and making sure you have enough meter in order to pick up those things, so it all comes together in a combat system that, similar to Sonic, is not great, but it works fairly well, and there are a couple of extra things going on in the combat with Silver's other abilities, because one other thing he has is he can just do like a psychic attack, and if you hit an enemy with this, it will stun them, and any enemy that's stunned, you can just pick them up like any other object and throw them at other enemies. Though that's not even really necessary. The moment you pick something up, it's basically dead. You can just let go of it and it will immediately die without you having to do anything, which is incredibly powerful, though it is pretty annoying to use because of how short range this blast is for Silver by default. You have to get so incredibly close to the thing that you're trying to hit with it that you're going to very easily end up touching enemies and taking contact damage, which is just really annoying. However, this is something that you can fix with the mod loader, giving this move much more range and making it much more viably useful. However, the real move for taking advantage of the abusability of stunning enemies is Silver gets like a ground shockwave thing you can do from the air, and this will stun any enemies in an area around you, and this is super good for combat, where you can just get in the middle of a group of enemies and stun them all at once, and then just pick them all up and let them go and kill everything in an instant. I don't know if this was supposed to be this way. I feel like you were supposed to like throw enemies into other ones, but the way it works out, you can just pick up enemies and drop them to kill them, so this really becomes the primary method of fighting for Silver, is trying to stun stuff and then kill it instantly by grabbing it, which actually ends up working out fairly well to add a little bit of extra depth to Silver's combat, because that becomes your best way to kill most enemies. Even big armored enemies, you can eventually stun them under certain circumstances and kill big enemies just like that. but there's also the consideration of like ranged enemies that are far away. It'd probably just be faster and easier to just pick something up and chuck it at them, or if enemies that are up in the air and you won't be able to stun them, you can pick up objects in that instance. And also if there are enemies further away and you do stun enemies and grab them while you're already holding something, you might as well throw it at the enemies over there. And so all of this combines into a fairly decent combat system for a 3D platformer. It works okay. Again, it's not amazing, but there's enough here that it does keep you thinking to a decent degree. It's got more going on than Sonic's combat has, that's for sure. As far as platforming stuff goes, Silver doesn't really have that many tools. His main ability for platforming is that you can spend your meter in the air to just hover and move around in the air. And of course, everybody knows about how insanely busted this move is, because it drains the meter while you're using the hover, but you can feather the button, and this makes it so you use substantially less meter while hovering around in the air, allowing you to cover way larger distances with this hover than you're supposed to be able to, which can absolutely be used for lots of unintended shortcuts to skip platforming sequences with Silver. How this ended up in the final game, I have no idea. I mean, almost everybody who plays Sonic 06 finds this bug. I mean, I know that this game was rushed to fuck, but they couldn't even fix something this egregious. Then again, they couldn't even be bothered to make Sonic's meter work at all, so yeah, I guess they didn't have time for it. At least a bug like this doesn't really hinder the gameplay at all. I mean, it obviously fucks up the level design substantially, but in terms of you as the player, it actually gives you more openness and allows you to approach the level design in, a more creative way. So, it's not the worst thing in the world. The other air ability Silver has is that he can do a short air dash, and this basically becomes your primary method of moving around as Silver, because this motherfucker is a slow-ass bitch. He is not at all fast in any capacity like Sonic or Shadow or other characters are supposed to be. He is intentionally a slow character, and so he goes way, way slower than Sonic does. It's kind of painful just moving around with Silver until you get this air dash. But once you get it, it just turns into air dashing everywhere all the time just to move that little bit faster. But you know what? Something cool I discovered during my playthrough of Sonic 06 is something I'm pretty sure is some actual full-on speedrun tech with Silver. I noticed that when you do his, Psychic Blast in the air, right as soon as your air dash ends, then the speed from your air dash will be preserved for the duration of the attack and allow you to air dash much further than you would otherwise. I found this completely by accident while playing, and I was like, whoa, what the hell? What just happened? Why'd I go so far there? And after a little bit of experimenting, I figured out how it works a little bit. Though I must say, the timing on this is insanely tight. It's gotta be 1 to 3 frames or something like that, because it is really hard to do consistently. But because Silver is so goddamn slow, and I want to speed him up as much as possible, it turned into a thing that I was constantly attempting to do just over and over and over, and I actually did start to get pretty good at doing this move pretty regularly. I got some instances where I was able to do it over 10 times in a row. And so this actually kind of started to make running around as Silver and trying to go quickly kind of fun, because there's this constant input challenge that you have to do to try to speed this guy up. If you can land this consistently, then Silver isn't even the slowest of the main 3 characters anymore. Last ability that Silver has is that if you get on top of a physics object that you can normally pick up and manipulate as Silver, and then you try to activate telekinesis, then Silver will, put telekinesis into the object he's standing on, and you can move it around as he lifts it up into the air. This is something that the game doesn't ask you to use very regularly, only a couple of times, but it does have lots of practical application for taking shortcuts, because there's lots of instances in the game where you can get up on something, raise it up a little bit, and then jump off of it in order to get up to a higher area, skipping platforming sequences. So it kind of rewards looking at the level a little bit more critically than just going forward on the obvious path, which is pretty cool and kind of maintains that traditional Sonic gameplay, but in a different form for this character that has a very different focus to how he plays. And that's pretty much Silver. He doesn't have anything particularly super fancy or cool like Sonic does with the gems or anything like that. He's just some fairly standard 3D platforming with some telekinesis and physics focus, with a little bit of that traditional Sonic gameplay in his design, but he definitely is not your typical Sonic type of gameplay. he definitely does not have nearly as much focus on like the time attack elements of his levels. They don't really split very often. They do occasionally in the traditional Sonic way, but for the most part, Silver is just going through kind of linear areas where you just use his abilities for platforming and combat like you would a more traditional 3D platformer. And I actually have to say that of all of Sonic Team's attempts at alternative gameplay styles in all these different Sonic games, Silver's is actually my favorite thus far. He has a good breadth of abilities that all are fairly useful in different ways, and that offers enough variety to his platforming and combat that I actually find his gameplay fairly enjoyable. His campaign is definitely my least favorite of the three, but it's not horrible. I actually think that it works relatively well. My main criticism for it previously was that Silver is very slow, but with this little air dash glitch that I discovered, that's not even really a problem anymore, so I actually kinda like Silver. I don't really find that his levels are super fun for time attack particularly, but just as a 3D platformer to play, it's pretty good. I'll certainly take this over Amy or treasure hunting or mech stages or fucking fishing. But of course, just like Sonic, he does have his two sidekicks that you can also play as, and they're not really that complex, so I'll cover them pretty quickly. First up, we have Blaze, and she kind of functions as the speed element of Silver's gameplay. She plays like a more traditional Sonic character in this adventure style would. She has a homing attack, she has a double jump unique to her, she has an air dash that works fairly differently than Sonic's and Shadow's because it does kind of have you go up and down depending on the momentum of your jump. And she also has this spinning flame claw thing that she can do that basically functions similarly to Sonic's anti-gravity kick. And that's pretty much all there is to say about Blaze. She basically just functions as letting Silver have some more Sonic-style gameplay, which, you know, that's fine, it works. Silver's other sidekick that he gets is Amy, and Amy is even fucking slower than Silver. She is the slowest fucking character in the game, and she is also the worst character to play as by far. She has a double jump similar to Blaze, though normally this move goes insanely slowly. You basically cannot move at all when doing Amy's double jump, but with the mod loader you actually get some free movement with Amy that actually makes her double jump feel pretty good. And of course she has her hammer attack, and similar to Sonic Adventure it has that issue where you stop in place when you use it, though the animation is way longer than it was in Sonic Adventure, so it's even worse to use. However, Amy does not have an airborne hammer attack alternative that she can use in this game, meaning the only way to hit enemies with Amy is to do this incredibly slow hammer attack that stops you dead in your tracks. I guess it is appropriate for Amy's character that she is the weakest and worst one when it comes to combat, but my god, it really sucks to fight enemies with her. And one weird thing that Amy can do that I don't understand whatsoever is she can turn invisible for some reason. What the fuck? Why could she do this? Why is this an ability Amy has? Was like this supposed to be Espio or something? Like what the what? This game just is like, oh yeah, Amy can turn invisible, you know, normal thing for Amy. Like what? I guess the idea is supposed to be that like because Amy is weak, instead of fighting enemies, you're supposed to try to sneak past them. But why invisibility? That just seems so out of place for Amy. There is no explanation about why she can do this. And the move isn't even useful because of how long the animation is to enter and exit the invisibility, so I never even bother using it anyway. So that's pretty much it for the Silver gameplay, thank God. Not nearly as much to talk about in terms of the Sonic campaign. Overall, I find the Silver campaign to be fairly fun. Not the greatest thing in the world, definitely the weakest part of the game, but not miserable. A lot of people don't like Silver, and I totally understand why. I think a big part of it comes from the fact that most people, when they first play through the game, they don't realize how good it is for Silver to just stun enemies, because relying entirely on his physics-based combat of picking stuff up and throwing at enemies, combat can become fairly tedious, and also very annoying when you don't have objects in the immediate area to throw at enemies, and you have to rely on them to respawn, or enemies shooting missiles at you and stuff. It can get kind of tiresome. But when you take advantage of everything Silver has going on, then it's pretty okay. It's okay. I like it. Playing as Blaze is fun. It gives you some of that more traditional Sonic gameplay every now and then. And Amy isn't great per se, but you only play as her like once in Silver's main levels, and it's very, very brief, so it's not really that much of a problem. I guess one part of Silver's campaign in particular that's worth mentioning is the infamous ball puzzle. But I'm gonna be honest, the very first time I did this puzzle, I nailed it first try without having to restart it even once. Though that's not me saying that this ball puzzle is okay, because I definitely remember in my previous playthroughs having a lot of trouble with it, so it is definitely awful. But hey, this is an instance where you can use the game's shittiness to your advantage, because all you have to do is take a box, put it up against the door, ride the box up into the ceiling until you can clip through the wall, and then hey, no box puzzle needed, and it's not even that difficult to do. So if you ever end up playing Silver's campaign in Sonic 06, do this. It's much easier and not nearly as much of a pain in the ass. So with Silver's core gameplay out of the way, I'm going to spend the rest of the video talking about the other elements of the core gameplay of Sonic 06. First up, let's talk about the boss fights in this game. Not just for Silver, but for the game in general. And I must say, Jesus fucking Christ, this game has some of the worst boss fights I have ever encountered in a video game. The game has one good boss fight, in my opinion, being the Egg Cerberus. This is the only fight in the game that actually is kind of designed decently well, sort of like a Sonic boss should, but everything else is absolutely awful. And it's very similar to the things that we've encountered previously with Sonic boss fights, just that all the problems are essentially tenfold what they've been in the past. Primarily, the big issue is bosses where you have to wait for them to make themselves vulnerable in order to attack them, and in between those periods is a whole lot of doing abso-fucking-lutely nothing. These boss fights drag on and on and on, far worse than anything that has been in a previous Sonic game. Like, Chaos 4 was such a shitty fight in Sonic Adventure, well, this game has its own fucking Chaos 4 with this Iblis fight. Oh my god, it's so bad, and you have to fight it twice, isn't that great? Other boss fights are kind of just bad and not really good, just kind of boring and very simple and uninteresting. And of course everybody knows about the horrible Silver boss fight that can catch a new player off guard and kill them instantly, which is not okay at all. So the boss fights in this game are just universally atrocious. Though that's not something too new for the Sonic series, now is it? Have I made my point yet that I don't think bosses should be in these games because they have been almost universally terrible in every single one? Another thing I want to touch on in this video is the 100% experience. Holy fucking shit, it is by far the worst one yet. So first, the lesser issue I'll get out of the way is collecting all the silver medals in the levels. This isn't too terrible. There are 10 silver medals hidden around every single level in the game, but as I talked about in my Shadow the Hedgehog video, I don't really like collectibles in linear games because it just forces you to replay the levels over and over and over, checking every single nook and cranny to find these things, and you'll inevitably get to the point where you're only missing one or two and you have no idea where they are in these gigantic levels, and you just have to look up the locations where you just get frustrated and bored. Collecting these things can be a little bit cool sometimes because they show you hidden areas or side paths that you probably wouldn't know exist otherwise, but overall collecting them is kind of a pain in the ass. Though that is nowhere near as much of a pain in the ass as it is to get all of the S ranks in the game. I guess that's just something in itself that's worth mentioning, is that they have increased the rank from A rank to S rank in this game, because as we all know from playing Japanese games, S ranks are way better than A ranks. And there's two major problems with getting all the S ranks in the game, which is number one, how many fucking levels there are, because you have not only all of the normal levels that you have to do through the game, but you also have all the hard mode variants of every single level, and all of the DLC very hard levels, as well as the DLC exclusive levels, which, by the way, can I just say, why the fuck does this game even have DLC? Like, it was so unfinished and broken at release. And instead of making patches, Sega told Sonic Team to make paid DLC instead. What the fuck is wrong with these people? Anyway, you also have to do all of the boss fights, and there are these DLC boss rushes that you have to do where you fight a character's entire slew of boss fights, as well as having arena fights with a bunch of enemies in between every single boss. And the town missions as well. And if it was just the main levels, the boss fights, and the town missions, I wouldn't really have a problem getting all the S ranks. The issue comes in when you also go for them in the hard and very hard levels, because as I said in the previous video, the hard mode levels are really not that different than the main levels, so it's kind of just do it again. And while the very hard levels can be very different than the normal levels, it is still ultimately reusing these same levels a third time, which is not even to mention the fact that you are reusing levels entirely across the different campaigns. You know, every character has their own version of Crisis City that they play through, but you are still ultimately just playing the same levels, just with different obstacles and enemies and platforming sequences, which offers enough variety for this to get by for the 3 playthroughs of the normal campaign. But when you need to play through a level like Crisis City 9 goddamn times for all of the different variants of it, holy shit, it is the Sonic Heroes problem all over again. Granted, the levels are more modified across each of these different variants, but still, playing these levels this many times absolutely starts to get repetitive and extremely tiring, especially considering that when you're going for S ranks, you're not going to get all the S ranks on your first try, meaning you're going to be playing these levels far more than just 9 times. It can help to vary up the levels you do, like not doing all of the Crisis City levels all in one go can help pacing a little bit, but still, by the end of it, I was so fucking sick of playing these levels over and over and over again. But actually, I would say that is the lesser issue when it comes to going for S ranks. The bigger issue is the scoring system. I've already talked about how I don't like the scoring system in Sonic Adventure 2 and Sonic Heroes because they focus on you getting a good score, meaning slowing down to get points rather than trying to play through the level as quickly as possible. And this results in levels taking way longer than they normally need to. Like, normally, I would say that the level length in Sonic 06 is pretty good for Sonic levels, when you're trying to just complete the level, but if you're trying to get an S rank, you need to stop and fight enemies and collect... And all this stuff makes these levels take so much longer, way longer than it ever did in the Sonic Heroes levels. There are absolutely some levels here, especially like the hard mode and very hard levels and the DLC levels, that can take upwards of 20 or 30 minutes in order to get an S rank. This results in you doing a fucking playthrough of one of these levels that takes like 28 fucking minutes, and then you don't get the S rank, and you have to do it fucking again. It is absolutely fucking miserable. I already didn't like this score-based focus that these ranking systems have before, but after getting all the S ranks in this game, it is 100% clear in my mind. Fuck playing these games for score. It absolutely sucks. I cannot fucking stand this shit. It is miserable. And a big part of that is that they have added a new element to the scoring system that makes it even fucking worse than it has been in the previous games. Because they have now added a bonus at the end of the level for how many you're holding on to once you reach the goal. And on paper, this sounds like a perfectly logical thing to put into a Sonic game because it gives you a motivation to not take hits and not lose all of your... The problem is, this makes it so that you are unevenly punished and unfairly punished depending on where you get hit in the level. Because for some of these S ranks, you absolutely need to have a big bonus at the end of the level in order to get the S rank. Which means you are not allowed to take a hit at all toward the latter part of the level. However, you're allowed to take hits all you want in the earlier parts of the level with basically no punishment. This means that you can have it where the player has a nearly flawless playthrough of the level, where they only take one hit throughout the entirety of it, but if they take that hit at the end of the level, then, oh, sorry, no S rank for you. However, if they take the hit at the beginning of the level, then hey, no problem, you can still get the S rank by collecting... and getting the bonus at the end. You still have plenty of level left to collect more, and so it means that a mistake at the end of the level is worse than a mistake at the beginning of the level, which makes absolutely no sense. At the end of the day, it's still the same thing. You play through the level flawlessly, but only make one mistake. Why does where that mistake happens make such a big difference? It doesn't make any sense. And it adds on to the repetitiveness of playing these levels over and over to get these S ranks, because you can have a really good run that's definitely going to get you the S rank, and then you just take a stray last-minute hit right before you hit the goal, and you just completely wasted 30 minutes on this run, and you have to start all over again. The amount of times I had to play these fucking levels to get all these S ranks, it was absolute fucking agony. While I do think that Sonic 06 can be a fun game despite all of its issues, for the love of God, do not try to 100% this game. Don't even go for the S ranks, in my opinion. It is nothing but misery. It fucking sucks. If you're gonna play Sonic 06, then just play through the story and maybe go for time attacks if that's your thing. Anything more than that is not at all fucking worth it, dude. It fucking sucks. So now, with all that negativity out of the way, let's get back to talking about the parts of the game that are actually fun in the core gameplay, with the Shadow Campaign in Part 3, which, oh my god, I can't believe this is going on to 3 parts. There's just so much to talk about Sonic 06. Jesus Christ. So I'll see you then. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed.